I am wrapping up all the books that I read in September, and there were quite a few. Wait, I haven't counted how many. Right, sorry about that. I read 11 books in the month of September, and I am here to talk to you about them and tell you what I thought of them. Now, before I begin, hi, my name is Smriti. Thank you for joining. If you are new here, I hope that you subscribe, because I talk about books, and if books is what you want, then books conversations is what I will give you. Sorry, that was weird. But if you are new here in general, because I know that some people have subscribed to me after my review of the 7 Moons of Maali Almeida or Chats with the Dead, hi, thank you for subscribing. I hope that you enjoy the content that I make, and if you are like really old here, then like, hey buddy, how are ya? Leave a comment down below to say hi, how are you? Anyway, sorry, that's weird. New people, this is what you're gonna expect. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, point is, I read 11 books and I am here to talk to you about them. So let me just get into that before I say weird things. And yeah. Alright, so I have read a few of these books for videos. So I'm going to talk about those in the end. And I'm going to talk about the books that I have not read in videos and like tell you about them. So the first one that I have is this one, which is The Last White Man by Mohsin Hamid. Now this was a book that I was really looking forward to reading because I have read Mohsin Hamid before, and I think that he is a stunning writer. He is a person who writes very like simply, but like I feel like it's very effective in the way that he goes about his plots and the way that he thinks. And I think that this book had like one of the most interesting premises ever, which is essentially that white people are waking up to find themselves not white anymore. And essentially we are following this one guy whose name is Anders. Yeah, Anders. And he basically wakes up and he's like, he's not white anymore. And it's really weird. And like he's trying to deal with that and trying to understand what that means. And soon we find out that many other people around this world are also becoming like brown or black or whatever, and it's just how they cope and what the world reacts. And I think that this did a really good job in explaining to us how the world may have reacted. However, I feel like it did like, I don't know, I just wish it did a little more because it was such an amazing premise, right? Like I feel like I wish that we got a little more of like the racial aspect of it, or like how people were dealing with their privilege, white privilege going away and all of that sort of stuff. Instead, I think that this book did a really good job in terms of talking about grief, because Anders is one character in this who we're following, who has lost, well, his mum, and we are also following this other person called Una, who he later develops like a relationship with. This is not a spoiler, it's fine. And she has lost like her father as well as her brother, and like how they talk about grief, I thought was just one of the most stunning portrayals of like just talking about it. So I really appreciated this book, which may have spoken more about race and privilege and all of that. Instead, I appreciated for grief. So that was interesting. I feel like this was maybe like a lost opportunity for Mohsin Hamid. I feel like he could have done way more with this like premise, but oh well, it still was an okay read. I gave this about like a 3 to 3.5 stars, I think. Yeah. Next, I decided to read this one, which is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. This is a book that I've been meaning to read ever since I saw Dipanjana Pal, who, I don't know if you guys follow her. She's a journalist slash like an editor now for Film Companion, which is like this huge YouTube channel slash like organization that talks about books and pop culture, etc. And she did like a podcast, if you guys remember Books on Toast. Well, we did a podcast with her where we spoke about contemporary women writers, and she recommended this book. And since then, I think that was like 5 or 6 years ago, I bought this book because I was like, this sounds so interesting, and then I never read it. And now I have gone on in deep detail and not told you what this book is about. Essentially, Angela Carter has taken a bunch of fairy tales and like twisted them and made them more like feminist and gruesome. So we have, for example, Red Riding Hood, we have Beauty and the Beast, we have other things like other fairy tales that I didn't even know of, like the Bluebeard fairy tale I didn't know of. So the Rumpelstiltskin and a bunch of that, and made them just like she didn't like retell them, but like basically took the premise of it and then just wrote her own thing. That's how I would look at this, and I think that's how the author also thought of it. I thought that this book was really interesting in some stories, and some I just didn't really care for. Maybe some of them were because I didn't really know the stories before, but like I really like the Red Riding Hood ones and like a bunch of other ones. So I would recommend this one, albeit cautiously. That's my thought process for The Bloody Chamber. I do want to read more Angela Carter though, so if you have any recommendations or any books that you think I need to get to ASAP, if you have read her, please do let me know down in the comments. Okay, next is a book that I thought was honestly one of my most anticipated reads of the year, not only because I love Taylor Jenkins Reid in general, but because I also weirdly like the sport of tennis, and that is Carrie Soto is back. Because essentially in this book we are following Carrie Soto, who was a minor person who was mentioned in her previous book Malibu Rising. I, by the way, did like an entire review for that, so if you want to check that out you can. I will link that up and down. But yeah, so Carrie Soto is basically a tennis star. She like set the world record, and then she had to retire because like physically tennis takes a lot out of you. So she retired, and then 5 years later, essentially there is a person who is coming for her record, and she is just like this really competitive, ruthless person, and she's like, you know what, I can't have another person take this record from me. So she decides to get back into tennis, and she basically plays the 4 Grand Slams. So basically Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon, and then US Open. Yeah, I know tennis. Anyway, yeah, so we follow her during like practicing for all of this, but not only that, we follow her relationship with various people, especially like her father, who was also like her coach, but also like other people around her, and we get to understand how she is as a person. Now, a lot of people have said while reading this book that they didn't like Carrie Soto as a person, and I am the complete opposite. I really like Carrie Soto as a person. I thought that I completely understood where she came from. I thought that she was a very interesting character where she was so against like the female characters that we usually know, who are very like demure and nice and all of that. She was just like a hard ass. Like she was like, I'm gonna come here and get this shit done, and like this is what I have lived for, this is what I play for. I love doing this, and I'm gonna make sure that like my record doesn't get broken. And like I loved that fire in her, you know, like I just really appreciated it. So I liked the book in terms of understanding her as a person, as well as like how we see her change through this year, and how we get to see her like basically her walls come down and all of that. We know how it's gonna go. But I think that was the problem with this book, is that while with other Taylor Jenkins Reid books, I read them and I didn't quite know where we were going to go. In this one, I felt like it was like this very linear sort of plot, which I was like, I'm not used to this with Taylor Jenkins Reid, you know, and I think that sort of like detracted from my experience, because I knew where this was going to go, and it just like kept hitting those things, and like it just became very like predictable for me. So I didn't quite fully enjoy my journey because of that. And yeah, I think that this book was fine for that. However, I do think that this book did an amazing job in terms of like calling out the sexism that people face in general. I do know, however, that Taylor Jenkins Reid has been called out for her representation of Latina women. Now, since I am not Latina, I cannot speak to that, but I think I can link you to some of the people who have spoken about it. And yeah, that's that. I enjoyed this. I think that you will too. Why am I like moving this from here to here? No one knows. But yeah, I think that this was a good, enjoyable read. This wasn't my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid, however, and I feel like she could do better, which is why my ratings were slightly low. I think this was like a 3.5 to 4 star. 4 star, yeah. But yeah, this wasn't I just expected more from Taylor Jenkins Reid, okay? Now, another person who I expect more from, but constantly lets me down, and I don't know why I keep reading her, is Ruth Ware. And this was her big chunky book that I read of hers, which is The It Girl, which just came out that month, I think. And I was really excited to read it because I thought that it sounded really cool. It's basically following this group of friends. Basically, we're mainly following this one lady who, in college, her roommate person was killed, and she was this really fancy it girl. She was really rich and came from like a really wealthy family and was like just the it girl of like she was basically Regina George. She was Regina George, all right. And we are following the Lindsay Lohan character. So we're basically following Carrie, who now later on is reflecting on what happened, because essentially the person who they charged for the murder, who they think did it, has died. And now a lot of people are getting in touch with her again to be like, hey, do you think he was really the killer? And now she is like, I don't know anymore. So she starts like questioning it and going back and trying to understand what exactly may have happened. And yeah, that's the story. However, this book, even though I flew through it very, like, Ruth Ware writes well, right? She's not a bad writer, so you can't like fault her for that. But it was just so slow. Like, the pacing was so slow. But I also read it in 2 days, so I don't know what to tell you. But I don't know, this book also just was so cliched. Like, there was nothing new with this book. I thought that the idea of it sounded cool, and like that Ruth Ware could have probably done something to infuse like new life into these tired, like, sort of like caricatures of characters, etc. But like, absolutely nothing. I feel like we got what like we have always gotten, and also by the end of it we knew what was gonna happen. So I was just like sad by it by the end of the day, and like, yeah, I didn't quite like it. I think I gave this one like a 3-star maybe. Again, I don't think that this was a bad book. I think you can read it if you are okay to just like have something to read, but like, I also think there are better things to read in life, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one. But if you have nothing else and you're like, sure, why not? The last book from my, I have not spoken about this on my channel, is this one, which is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Now, this is a book that I have been meaning to read for a while now, but I honestly did not have the courage to do so, because it talks about grief, and like, I have lost a parent, and I'm like, whoo, don't know if I want to get into that. But anyway, this one is basically about Michelle Zauner and like her time mourning her mother, because her mother passed when she was 24 years old, and she talks about her relationship with her mum, as well as like taking care of her when she was sick, as well as like what happened post, and just like her dealing with all of this. And I thought that this was really good. I'm not gonna say that this was like the best thing that I have read. I gave this like a 4-star. I think that maybe like the hype is a little up there, but like, it was good. It's not bad. What I really liked about this book was how she spoke about her Korean heritage, because essentially what happens in this book is that like, we are seeing Michelle, whose mother was Korean, however her father is white, and she lives somewhere in the States, I'm not really sure, but like far away from anyone else who might be Korean, essentially. And she lives like this very like isolated sort of life. So after her mom dies, she basically is now craving that Koreanness, if that makes any sense, because she doesn't have that around her now. And the way that her and her mother sort of like bonded was over food. So she goes to H Mart, which is basically like a grocery store, but for like Asian foods, I'm assuming. And like, she goes there and she buys foods, and then she sees people around there, and like, she remembers all of the moments that she has with her mom, and she cries. I felt like she did a really good job in terms of being very honest about not only her experiences dealing with grief and like with taking care of her parents, etc., but also with like just the things that like her parents went through. So like, we got to know stuff about like her dad and her mom, and which were not very nice. But I liked how that was put in, because like we got this like holistic point of view, and it wasn't just like rainbows and sunshine and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, appreciated this book a lot. I would recommend. However, again, I would say if you are a person who gets triggered by grief, or like having to take care of a parent or a loved one, then be aware. But I thought that this was a good book, and I would recommend. 4 stars. Good job, Miss Zauner. What am I saying? Don't know. Alright, next we move on to the 3 books that I read for my Japanese thriller video. You can check that out in the description. I talk about it in more detail, but I will just run through the books here. The first one is this one, which is 3 Assassins by Kotaro Isaka, and translated by Sam Melissa, I think yes, Sam Melissa. I enjoyed this book. I thought that it was really good. It is written by the same guy who wrote Bullet Train, which has now become a movie. I really enjoyed Bullet Train. Bullet Train was a 5-star for me. This one was like a 4-star, I think. I like this book. It was like wild in terms of like all the different things that are happening, and I think that Kotaro Isaka does a really good job in terms of having like these different POVs, and then merging them together, and then all 3 of them doing like weird stuff. I don't know how to explain that, but like, yeah, I think Vlogspriti would do a better job. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. The next one that I read was a book that was recommended by so many people, and I've been meaning to read for so long, and that is The Devotion of Suspect X by Keigo Higashino. I don't know who it's translated by, but I will put their name here. But yeah, I enjoyed this book as well. I thought that it was really interesting. It was slow, but it's also like, it was like a why done it more than a who done. I don't know, because this one was a really interesting one, because we were following both perspectives and we knew exactly what was happening in both things, where essentially there's this woman and who lives with her daughter, young daughter, and she lives in this like apartment complex sort of thingy, and something happens. Her neighbors helping them with this, and being very vague, but I don't want to tell you what happens, so I'm sorry about that. And then we're also following like the detectives on the case, as well as like this consultant who is like known as Detective Galileo or something. Yeah, so we're following them trying to figure out what has happened as well. So we see both perspectives of like how this one is like, it's like a cat and mouse chase, that we know what's happening. So there's no suspense at all. There's no suspense, but there is, yeah. It was just really interesting, and I thought that it was really well done in terms of like how that played out. You know what I mean? It was just something that I had never like really seen before, because usually you have like just one perspective, whereas in this one we had both, and that was interesting. The next one is Penance by Kaniya Minato, and I wanted to read Kaniya Minato's book because I read Confessions last year, absolutely loved it, was like, whoa, this is amazing. And I think Kaniya Minato does like this thing where we basically again hear from different perspectives. Each chapter is really big, like 20 to 30 pages, and with each chapter we get to understand a little more, because with each perspective we get to understand a little more of like the holistic story. Because essentially the story is that there were these young girls who one day there was this other girl who they were hanging out with, and she gets taken away and then is like murdered, and they didn't know that this was happening. They thought like this guy came and he needed help or something like that, and essentially they are now like living their lives of sorts, but we see that there's a lot of stuff happening in their lives as well, and they are essentially either writing letters or are giving a speech or whatever, and through that perspective we get to understand like what happened on that day, but also what is happening in their lives. And trust me, what is happening in their lives is like so messed up. Like Kaniya Minato does this amazing job of just like giving you these really fucked up, twisted situations, especially in the end, which are just, you're just like, what? And I enjoyed that quite a bit. I thought that this was good, however, not like her most amazing work, I would like to say. The only other one I read was Confessions, as I've said, but I enjoyed it, but not like, oh, but I would still recommend it. I still think that it was good. So yeah, I think I again gave this one like a 4 star, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's really cool. I really enjoyed my time reading those 3 Japanese thrillers, and I would recommend that you go check out my vlog, because I clearly have not done a good enough job talking to you about them right now. But next we have my Booker video, which I did. So basically I read the Booker shortlist this year, and I decided to break them up into 2. So I read 3 Booker shortlisted books in one video and then 3 in the other. However, in this one, I read Trust as well, because I thought that I was going to be reading the entire like books that I thought were going to be on the shortlist. I don't know what I was doing. I thought Trust was going to be on the shortlist, okay? So I read Trust by Hernan Diaz, where essentially we are following, it's 4 books in one. That's basically what this book is. It's 4 books in one, where we are following the same central characters, who are the Ras or the, I'm forgetting the other ones. I'm forgetting the names. But yeah, this book was really interesting because I don't know how to talk about it. We are basically following this very wealthy family in the 1920s in the US. And the first book is basically like a fictionalized version of them. The second one is something else, and the third is something else. I honestly don't want to tell you too much about this book, because I feel like this is a sort of book that you need to go in blind. Only thing I will tell you is that the second book, the second part, is horrible and it is for a reason. So work through it, go through it. It goes by very fast, don't worry. And then you get to the third part, which starts getting like juicy. I thought that this book was really good. I thought that like Hernan Diaz is just like an amazing writer, that he got to write like 4 different sorts of stories in one book, which is amazing. And it brought about this whole idea of like who gets to tell the story and which part of the story is right and all of that sort of stuff, which is stuff that I just like eat up. I love like those sort of things. And yeah, I enjoyed this book. It was cool. You should check out more the video where I speak about it. But alright, and the last book that I have to talk to you about is Small Things Like These, which is a book that I own and I don't know where it is. Like, I genuinely have no idea. It's somewhere, but I don't know where it is right now, and that's fine. But essentially, this is a short, very, very short book that was, again, shortlisted for the Booker. And I, initially, when I read it, you will see my vlog, I was like, I don't know. But now I'm like, this is very smart. Essentially, we are following this man who is essentially this guy who owns like this coal distributing sort of thing in a small town in Ireland. And this is like right before Christmas. And we spend like the first half of this book of like 120 pages-ish of him and just understanding him and his like family life and how he has like 5 daughters and his life with his mum before, and he was sort of this bastard child, whatever. And then we basically see him deliver coal to this nunnery of sorts, and he sees something there, and that really disturbs him, and like it's basically how he then copes and deals with that and the choices that he makes post that. And this book is very, very quiet and it's very, very small, as I've said, but I think that like the beauty of this book is just like the amount that it has been able to say in those few pages, and the amount that we've been able to glean about this character and like what exactly would have made him do a certain thing. Like, it's just, I really think that a person has to be really talented to do that. So yeah, I really appreciated this book. I gave this initially a 3.5 star. I'm bumping up to a 4 now, and I would recommend it for just, I think that it is a good read. It's really short as well, so you don't really waste too much of your time. And yeah, I think that it like grows on you as like, yeah, which is Very cool.
I also forgot to mention that I read Chats with the Dead, which is a book that I not only read for that book of video, but also I have a completely different like review where I talk about this book in deep detail because this is The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida. Essentially, it won the Booker Prize and was also a 5-star read for me. I really, really enjoyed it, and I detail all the reasons why I love it in that standalone review video that I do. So check that out. And I can't believe that I forgot the only 5-star read that I had for the month.
And yeah, those are all the books, the 11 books that I read in September. There are a lot many books that I'm reading now in October, so I hope that you stick on and join me for my October wrap up whenever that happens. But also, like, check out my other videos that I will be putting up or have been putting up. And yeah, that's all for now. If you enjoyed, of course, do hit the like button and comment down below with any of the books that of this if you have read. Love to discuss them with ya. And that's all for now. I will see you in my next video. Bye.